archaic translation by W.H.D. Rouse. Jataka number Ghata-Jātaka. Present. Kanha. Rise, etc. This story the master told in Jetavana monastery about a son's death. The circumstances are like those in the Matha Kundali birth. Here again the master asked the lay disciple, "Are you in grief, layman?" He replied, "Yes, sir." "Layman," said the master, "long ago wise men listened to the asking of the wise, and did not grieve for the death of a son." And at his request, he told a story of the past life. Once upon a time, a king named Mahakamsa reigned in Uttarapatha, in the Kamsa district, in the city of Asatanjana. He had 2 sons, Kamsa and Upakamsa, and 1 daughter named Devagaba. On her birthday, the Brahmins who foretold the future said of her, "A son born of this girl will one day destroy the country and the lineage of Kamsa." The king was too fond of the girl to put her to death, but leaving her brothers to settle it, lived his days out, and then died. When he died, Kamsa became king, and Upakamsa was viceroy. They thought that there would be an outcry were they to put their sister to death, so resolved to give her in marriage to none, but to keep her husbandless, and watch. And they built a single round tower, for her to live in. Now she had a serving woman named Nandagopa, and the woman's husband, Andakavanhu, was the servant who watched her. At that time a king named Mahasagara reigned in Upper Mathura, and he had 2 sons, Sagara and Upasagara. At their father's death, Sagara became king, and Upasagara was viceroy. This boy was Upakamsa's friend, brought up together with him and trained by the same teacher. But he became involved in his brother's zenana, and being detected, ran away to Upakamsa in the Kamsa estate. Upakamsa introduced him to King Kamsa, and the king had him in great honor. Upasagara while waiting upon the king observed the tower where lived Devagaba. And on asking who lived there, heard the story, and fell in love with the girl. And Devagaba one day saw him as he went with Upakamsa to wait upon the king. She asked who that was. And being told by Nandagopa that it was Upasagara, son of the great king Sagara, she too fell in love with him. Upasagara gave a present to Nandagopa, saying, "Sister, you can arrange a meeting for me with Devagaba." "Easy enough," said Nandagopa, and told the girl about it. She being already in love with him, agreed at once. One night Nandagopa arranged an appointment, and brought Upasagara up into the tower. And there he stayed with Devagaba. And by their constant interaction and intercourse, Devagaba conceived. In due course of time it became known that she was with child, and the brothers questioned Nandagopa. She made them promise her pardon, and then told the ins and outs of the matter. When they heard the story, they thought, "We cannot put our sister to death. If she bears a daughter, we will spare the babe also. If a son, we will kill him." And they gave Devagaba to Upasagara to wife. When her full time came to be delivered, she brought on a daughter. The brothers on hearing this were delighted, and gave her the name of the lady Anjana. And they allotted to them a village for their estate, named Govardhana. Upasagara took Devagaba and lived with her at the village of Govardhana. Devagaba was again with child, and that very day Nandagopa conceived also. When their time was come, they brought on the same day, Devagaba a son and Nandagopa a daughter. But Devagaba, in fear that her son might be put to death, sent him secretly to Nandagopa, and received Nandagopa's daughter in return. They told the brothers of the birth. "Son or daughter?" they asked. "Daughter," was the reply. "Then see that it is reared," said the brothers. In the same way Devagaba had 10 sons, and Nandagopa 10 daughters. The sons lived with Nandagopa and the daughters with Devagaba, and not a soul knew the secret. The eldest son of Devagaba was named Vasudeva, the second Baladeva, the third Chanda Deva, the fourth Surya Deva, the fifth Aji Deva, the sixth Varuna Deva, the seventh Arjuna, the eighth Parjuna, the ninth Ghata Pandita, the 10th Anguttara. They were well known as the sons of Andakavanhu the servant, the 10 slave brethren. In course of time they grew big, and being very strong, and in addition fierce and ferocious, they went about plundering. They even went so far as to plunder a present being conveyed to the king. The people came crowding in the king's courtyard, complaining, Andakavanhu's sons, the 10 brethren, are plundering the land. So the king summoned Andakavanhu, and rebuked him for permitting his sons to plunder. In the same way complaint was made 3 or 4 times, and the king threatened him. He being in fear of his life craved the boon of safety from the king, and told the secret, that how these were no sons of his, but of Upasagara. The king was alarmed. How can we get hold of them? He asked his courtiers. They replied, Sire, they are wrestlers. Let us hold a wrestling match in the city, and when they enter the ring we will catch them and put him to death. So they sent for 2 wrestlers, Kanha and Mutthika, and caused proclamation to be made throughout the city by beat of drum, that on the 7th day there would be a wrestling match. The wrestling ring was prepared in front of the king's gate. There was an enclosure for the games, the ring was decorated bright-colored, the flags of victory were ready tied. The whole city was in a whirl. Line over line rose the seats, tier above tier. Kanha and Mutthika went down into the ring, and moved about, jumping, shouting, clapping their hands. The 10 brethren came too. On their way they plundered the washermen's street, and clad themselves in robes of bright colors, and stealing perfume from the perfumers' shops, and wreaths of flowers from the florists, with their bodies all anointed, garlands upon their heads, earrings in their ears, they moved into the ring, jumping, shouting, clapping their hands. At the moment, Kanha was walking about and clapping his hands. Baladeva, seeing him, thought, I won't touch the fellow with my hand. So catching up a thick strap from the elephant stable, jumping and shouting he threw it round Kanha's belly, and joining the 2 ends together, brought him tight, then lifting him up, swung him round over his head, and dashing him on the ground rolled him outside the arena. When Kanha was dead, the king sent for Mutthika. Up got Mutthika, jumping, shouting, clapping his hands. Baladeva hit him, and crushed in his eyes. And as he cried out, I'm no wrestler. I'm no wrestler. Baladeva tied his hands together, saying, Wrestler or no wrestler, it is all one to me, and dashing him down on the ground, killed him and threw him outside the arena. Mutthika in his death pains, uttered a prayer, May I become a goblin, and devour him. And he became a goblin, in a forest called by the name of Kalamattika. The king said, Take away the 10 slave brethren. At that moment, Vasudeva threw a wheel, which chopped off the heads of the 2 brothers. The crowd, terrified, fell at his feet, and pleaded him to be their protector. Thus the 10 brethren, having killed their 2 uncles, assumed the power of governing of the city of Asatanjana, and brought their parents there. They now set out, intending to conquer all India. In a while they arrived at the city of Ayodhya, the seat of King Kalasena. This they surrounded about, and destroyed the jungle around it, breached the wall and took the king prisoner, and took the power of governing of the place into their hands. From there they proceeded to Dvaravati. Now this city had on one side the sea and on one the mountains. They say that the place was goblin-haunted. A goblin would be stationed on the watch, who, seeing his enemies, in the shape of an ass, would bray as the ass brays. At once, by goblin magic, the whole city used to rise in the air, and deposit itself on an island in the midst of the sea. When the enemy was gone, it would come back and settle in its own place again. This time, as usual, no sooner the ass saw those 10 brethren coming, than he brayed with the bray of an ass. Up rose the city in the air, and settled upon the island. No city could they see, and turned back. Then back came the city to its own place again. They returned, again the ass did as before. The power of governing of the city of Dvaravati they could not take. So they visited Kanha and said, "Sir, we have failed to capture the kingdom of Dvaravati. Tell us how to do it." He said, "In a ditch, in such a place, is an ass walking about. He brays when he sees an enemy, and immediately the city rises in the air. You must clasp hold of his feet, and that is the way to accomplish your end." Then they took leave of the ascetic, and went all 10 of them to the ass, and falling at his feet, said, "Sir, we have no help but you. When we come to take the city, do not bray." The ass replied, "I cannot help braying. But if you come first, and 4 of you bring great iron plows, and at the 4 gates of the city dig great iron posts into the ground, and when the city begins to rise, if you will fix on the post a chain of iron fastened to the plow, the city will not be able to rise." They thanked him, and he did not utter a sound while they got plows, and fixed the posts in the ground at the 4 gates of the city, and stood waiting. Then the ass brayed. The city began to rise, but those who stood at the 4 gates with the 4 plows, having fixed to the posts iron chains which were fastened to the plows, the city could not rise. Upon that the 10 brethren entered the city, killed the king, and took his kingdom. Thus they conquered all India, and in 63,000 cities they killed by the wheel all the kings of them, and lived at Dvaravati, dividing the kingdom into 10 shares. But they had forgotten their sister, the lady Anjana. "So let us make 11 shares of it," said they. But Anguttara answered, "Give her my share, and I will take to some business for a living. Only you must remit my taxes each in your own country." They consented, and gave his share to his sister. And with her they lived in Dvaravati, 9 kings, while Anguttara embarked in trade. In course of time, they were all increased with sons and with daughters. And after a long time had gone by, their parents died. At that period, they say that a man's life was 20,000 years. Then died one clearly beloved son of the great king Vasudeva. The king, half dead with grief, neglected everything, and lay mourning, and clutching the frame of his bed. Then Ghata thought to himself, "Except me, no one else is able to soothe my brother's grief. I will find some means of soothing his grief for him." So assuming the appearance of madness, he paced through the whole city, gazing up at the sky, and crying out, "Give me a hair! Give me a hair!" All the city was excited. "Ghata has gone mad," they said. Just then a courtier named Rohinaya went into the presence of King Vasudeva, and opened a conversation with him by reciting the first stanza. Kanha. Rise. Why close the eyes to sleep? Why lying there? See yours own born brother, looses his mind away. And his wisdom. Ghata babbles. Listen you of long black hair. When the courtier had thus spoken, the master perceiving that he had risen, in his perfect wisdom uttered the second stanza. So soon the long-haired cassava heard Rohinaya's cry. He rose all anxious and distressed for Ghata's misery. Up rose the king, and quickly came down from his chamber. And proceeding to Gatapandita, he got fast hold of him with both hands. And speaking to him, uttered the third stanza. In maniac fashion, why do you pace Dvaraka all through? And cry, hair, hair. Say, who is there has taken a hair from you? To these words of the king, he only answered by repeating the same cry over and over again. But the king recited 2 more stanzas. Be it of gold, or made of jewels fine, or brass, or silver, as you may incline, shell, stone, or coral, I declare, I'll make a hair, and many other hairs there be, that move the woodland wide. They shall be brought, I'll have them caught. Say, which do you decide? On hearing the king's words, the wise man replied by repeating the 6th stanza. I crave no hair of earthly kind, but that within the moon. Oh, bring him down, O Cassava. I ask no other boon. Undoubtedly my brother has gone mad, thought the king, when he heard this. In great grief, he repeated the 7th stanza. In truth, my brother, you will die, if you make such a prayer. And ask for what no man may pray, the moon's celestial hair. Gatapandita, on hearing the king's answer, stood stock still, and said, My brother, you know that if a man prays for the hair in the moon, and cannot get it, he will die. Then why do you mourn for your dead son? If, Kanha, this you know, and can console another's suffering, why are you mourning still the son who died so long ago? Then he went on, standing there in the street, and I, brother, ask only for what exists, but you are mourning for what does not exist. Then he instructed him by repeating 2 more stanzas. My son is born, let him not die. Nor man nor deity can have that boon. Then for which reason ask for what can never be? Nor mystic charm, nor magic roots, nor herbs, nor money spent can bring to life again that ghost whom, Kanha, you mourn. The king, on hearing this, answered, Your intent was good, dear one. You did it to take away my trouble. Then in praise of Gatapandita he repeated 4 stanzas. Men had I, wise and excellent to give me good advice. But how has Gatapandita opened this day mine eyes? Blazing was I, as when a man pours oil upon a fire. You did bring water, and did quench the pain of my desire. Grief for my son, a cruel shaft was lodged within my heart. You have consoled me for my grief, and taken out the dart. That dart extracted, free from pain, tranquil, and calm I keep. Hearing, O youth, your words of truth, no more I grieve nor weep. And lastly, thus do the merciful, and thus they who are wise indeed. They free from pain, as Ghata here his eldest brother freed. This is the stanza of perfect wisdom. In this manner was Vasudeva consoled by Prince Ghata. After the lapse of a long time, during which he ruled his kingdom, the sons of the 10 brethren thought. They say that Kanha is possessed of divine insight. Let us put him to the test. So they procured a young boy, and dressed him up, and by binding a pillow about his belly, made it appear as though he were with child. Then they brought him into his presence, and asked him, When, sir, will this woman be delivered? The ascetic perceived that the time was come for the destruction of the 10 royal brothers. Then, looking to see what the term of his own life should be, he perceived that he must die that very day. Then he said, "Young sirs, what is this man to you? Answer us," they replied persistently. He answered, "This man on the 7th day from now will bring on a knot of acacia wood. With that he will destroy the line of Vasudeva, even though you should take the piece of wood and burn it, and threw the ashes into the river." "Ah, false ascetic," said they, "a man can never bring on a child." And they did the rope and string business, and killed him at once. The kings sent for the young men, and asked them why they had killed the ascetic. When they heard all, they were frightened. They set a guard upon the man. And when on the 7th day he voided from his belly a knot of acacia wood, they burnt it, and threw the ashes into the river. The ashes floated down the river, and stuck on one side by a back gate. From there grew an erica plant. One day, the kings proposed that they should go and enjoy themselves in the water. So to this back gate they came. And they caused a great pavilion to be made, and in that gorgeous pavilion they ate and drank. Then in sport they began to catch hold of hand and foot, and dividing into 2 parts, they became very quarrelsome. At last one of them, finding nothing better for a club, picked a leaf from the erica plant, which even as he picked it became a club of acacia wood in his hand. With this he beat many people. Then the others picked also, and the things as they took them became clubs, and with them they beat with sticks one another until they were killed. As these were destroying each other, 4 only, Vasudeva, Baladeva, the lady Anjana their sister, and the priest, mounted a chariot and fled away. The rest perished, every one. Now these 4, fleeing away in the chariot, came to the forest of Kalamattika. Their mutthika the wrestler had been born, having become according to his prayer a goblin. When he perceived the coming of Baladeva, he created a village in that spot. And taking the resemblance of a wrestler, he went jumping about, and shouting, "Who's for a fight?" snapping his fingers the while. Baladeva, as soon as he saw him, said, "Brother, I'll try a fall with this fellow." Vasudeva tried and tried his best to prevent him. But down he got from the chariot, and went up to him, snapping his fingers. The other just seized him in the hollow of his hand, and gobbled him up like a radish bulb. Vasudeva, perceiving that he was dead, went on all night long with his sister and the priest, and at sunrise arrived at a frontier village. He lay down in the shelter of a bush, and sent his sister and the priest into the village, with orders to cook some food and bring it to him. A huntsman noticed the bush shaking. "A pig, sure enough," thought he. He threw a spear, and pierced his feet. "Who has wounded me?" cried out Vasudeva. The huntsman, finding that he had wounded a man, set off running in terror. The king, recovering his wits, got up, and called the huntsman, "Uncle, come here, don't be afraid." When he came, "Who are you?" asked Vasudeva. "My name is Jara, my lord." "Ah," thought the king, "whom old age wounds will die, so the ancestors used to say. Without doubt I must die today." Then he said, "Fear not, uncle. Come, bind up my wound." The mouth of the wound bound up, the king let him go. Great pains came upon him. He could not eat the food that the others brought. Then addressing himself to the others, Vasudeva said, "This day I am to die. You are delicate creatures, and will never be able to learn anything else for a living. So learn this science from me." So saying, he taught him a science, and let them go. And then died immediately. Thus accepting the lady Anjana, they perished everyone, it is said. When the master had ended this discourse, he said, "Lay disciple, Thus people have got free from grief for a son by attending to the words of wise men of old. Do not you think about it? Then he explained the truths, and identified the birth. At that time, Ananda was Rohineya, Sariputra was Vasudeva, the followers of the Buddha were the other persons, and I myself was Gatapandita.